I thought it was fairly solid analysis, and I say that as someone who risks getting bounced out of this studio and replaced by Nate Erskine-Smith on the power panel.
Is this a crazy left-wing YouTube channel that I'm watching here, or is this CBC, or is it probably both? Nate Erskine-Smith gave the Conservatives the biggest gift they could have asked for, a change in the narrative. But that didn't stop CBC from playing the most awkward game of Twister we've ever seen, as David Cochrane contorts himself into embarrassing narrative positions in order to try to defend the Liberal problem child, when just a few days ago, they were saying that Poilievre's leadership was in jeopardy for effectively the same thing. Let's take a look.
But as the Prime Minister sells the budget, one of his own MPs is pointing out some of its flaws.
First, stalled climate action, cutting tree planting, moving away from an emissions cap, winding down greener homes. No new money for climate action. On housing, it falls short of these specific promises in our platform, and it unfortunately falls well short of the wartime effort that many of us thought we'd deliver. The budget adds $140 billion in new spending over 5 years, $90 billion net after savings, and only 36% of the net new spending is capital. My kids shouldn't pay for today's military or for me to save $400 of income taxes. We see the budget commit to a new, inefficient fossil fuel subsidy for LNG facilities. We do not need more public dollars chasing fossil fuels. Worse, we see major cuts of over $2.5 billion over 4 years to international development assistance. Overall, the budget meets the moment in part, but fairly, it does not live up to its promise of generational investments.
Okay, Vandana, that's like Scott Aitchison, Elizabeth May, and Don Davies had a kid, because it's sort of all of their criticisms all at once. I'm pretty sure Nate Erskine-Smith is a Liberal member of Parliament. I may need to double check, but what do you make of that messaging coming from the caucus?
Yeah, and I would say there are elements of this video in full where he also compliments the budget, so if people want to check it out. And I'll give two perspectives. One, in my old job, when I was in Prime Minister's office, I did hate this. I wanted people to say one message. But having from the outside, I would say it's actually really important, especially as you alluded to, the current makeup of the Conservative caucus, that while he has criticisms that I think are fairly fair on the budget. I think it's important that in one caucus, you could have someone having criticisms and have a robust discussion on the budget. He is accountable to the people who elected him. And in Beaches East York, there are people who will care about those issues. So he is talking about them. He says positive things about the budget as well. But I think that's actually healthy for democracy. If you are too hyper-partisan and people are just become clapping seals behind the Prime Minister, that's not credible for Canadians. So I think for Canadians, they feel comfort that someone like Nathaniel Erskine-Smith is part of the caucus, that he can raise these issues, that he can drive some policy, that he has influence. So I think that's actually better, especially as we're talking about hyper-partisanship, what is possible for what is best for Canadians. I think this is actually something that will cause comfort for Canadians, that you can have this conversation in the kind of caucus, and that perhaps the Prime Minister will listen to those kind of points that Nathaniel Erskine-Smith brought forward.
Okay, folks. Off we go to the races. So, you have a former staffer to Justin Trudeau. That's who this lady is. And she's trying to say, oh, well, you can have constructive conversation. It's good to have criticism. This is what Canadians want. And Canadians are comforted to have Nate Erskine-Smith in the caucus. And, it's good for democracy. This hyper-partisanship, it's not very good for Canada. Okay, time out here. We just had a whole week of Liberals and NDP and CBC and all over the media crapping all over the Conservatives. Now, is it justified to give them media attention because one of them crossed the floor? Yeah, absolutely. But this isn't the first time that we've heard about this, right? We have heard about all of these news reports where allegedly Conservative insiders have gone to the media and said, well, we're not happy because of this, and I've raised this, and I'm not happy with this. And they're all saying, oh, well, this is a question of Pierre Poilievre's leadership. Oh, this is going to cause conservative supporters a lot of anxiety, and this is an issue, and yada, 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 yada. But when a liberal does even more, right? It's not like they're going to the media and saying, oh, I'm not too happy about this budget. They're literally going to YouTube, recording a video, putting it out there and saying, hey, everybody, it's me. You know who I am. I'm a Liberal MP. I don't give a crap, and I don't like this budget for all of these reasons. That's way, way worse than what any of the Conservatives allegedly did with these unnamed sources that they can't name talking to the media to create a narrative that the Conservative caucus is falling apart. But when this happens, oh, it's just fine. It's constructive criticism. Good stuff. Right.
Brad, what do you make of that? I mean, Vandana is right. There is more to that video, but it's like 4.5 minutes long. So, we can't play the whole thing. And that's not a criticism. Like, Nate Erskine-Smith's a pretty effective communicator in this medium. And while, yes, there are things he does like, there are clear points there about the falling short, the housing thing in particular. It's exactly what Scott Aitchison, the conservative critic, and Mike Moffat, who does work in the space, said. It is a retreat from the election promises to now, right?
Yeah. So if anybody wants to know why Nate Erskine-Smith is not in cabinet, this would be an example of that. Now, to Vandana's point about how, it's a democracy and all that good stuff, 100%, and yes, he's outlining criticisms from each of the three opposition parties that you've outlined. But, being in caucus and being in government is also a team sport. And right now, the Prime Minister, for Liberal MPs, their job is not to highlight to highlight the inadequacies. It's to promote the aspects that the Prime Minister wants. The opposition's job is to highlight that which is in there. So, I'm all in favor of having MPs stand up for their constituents. There was nothing about his particular riding that he really spoke to. He spoke of general Canadian ones. Not helpful for the Prime Minister or the sales job that the cabinet has on this. And team players, unfortunately, those that rogue individual MPs don't get, a lot of sway within caucus because they can't be counted on to pull together as a team.
Well, Kate, Brad is right. Politics is theoretically a team sport. Maybe if you want to run for Ontario Liberal leader, you might do things to carve out your own brand. But this is still a Liberal member of Parliament criticizing the Liberal government in pretty significant ways, while the Prime Minister is out selling it.
So that was the Conservative commentator that was just talking there, and he's 100% on point. And this is where it differs between the Liberals and the Conservatives. When you're in any leadership team, and when you're in government, you're in the leadership team of the country. It doesn't matter if you're in cabinet or not. That's where you are. And if you're coming out with a budget, the last thing that you should be doing, whether you disagree with it or not, is going off on your own and saying, I disagree with this budget. You should have been raising that within your caucus. You should be raising that within meetings with the Prime Minister. You should be raising that with meetings with the ministers. And you've chosen to run for a party. And unless there's something corrupt or criminal going on, if it's just policy, then you need to take a step back and say, well, I voiced my concerns and they weren't listened to in this aspect. Maybe they were listened to in this other aspect. The time is over for debate, and I now need to represent this budget as the party's budget. You have to be a team player when it comes to this. And this is where most of the Conservatives, well, I guess I can say all because the remaining Conservatives seem to understand this, that it is a team sport, and you need to stick together. And usually, those who stick together win together. So this is the issue when it comes to the Liberal caucus and Nathaniel Erskine-Smith. And the guy's right. This is going to hurt Mark Carney. Huge, it's going to hurt him. Not only did it allow the Conservatives and the media to turn the page on the floor crossing, because that's now ancient history, it also focuses attention on Mark Carney. You're trying to say that this is a generational budget. You're trying to say this is great for Canadians when your own people, your own MPs in your party are giving the exact same criticisms of this budget as the business community and the opposition parties. That's not a good thing when a whole bunch of people agree that your budget is bad.
Yeah, geez, Nate, could you not have released that video any earlier just to take some of the heat off of the blue team in terms of people that were dissatisfied with the approach of their caucus? No, I think that Brad is quite right. It is a team sport, and I'll just use a corporate analogy here. There's often a lot of debate and discussion amongst the senior management team before a decision is made and taken by the CEO. That is the opportunity, if you are a member of the government, to raise your concerns and try to push for what it is your constituents want to see, or what your business line might want to see, if I'm sticking with a corporate analogy. And so everybody goes into that boardroom, they says their piece, and then they leave with whatever the decision is made by the CEO. And so the opportunity for Nathaniel Erskine-Smith to have those concerns came and went. And I think that, it's not to suggest that he has to dilute his perspective or his objective on certain issues. This is not the first time that he has, stepped out of line with the party line and the caucus line. But at the same time, you show that you are a part of the team by supporting the leader and supporting the decisions that are taken, and then letting your constituents know that you're going to keep pushing on these issues and keep fighting for their interests, even if it's not the decision that was necessarily taken in last week's budget.
Now that's the NDP. And everybody here understands what's going on with the news cycle, and when certain events happen and eclipse others. Even she's saying, "Oh, did you have to release that video? Because now that completely buries the conservative issue that happened last week with the floor crossing of Chris d'Entremont." That's what happens. And then the NDP lady goes on to agree with the Conservatives, saying, yeah, all of this should have been held in the back. Meanwhile, the Liberal lady is sitting there, thinking that she's going to get the left-wing NDPer to agree with her, and when she doesn't, her face goes completely flat and says, oh, well, I guess I'm alone here. Well, not to fear, you're not alone, because remember, you're on CBC.
Rob, I think corporate analogies are appropriate when talking about the management style of this government, but Nate Erskine-Smith is no longer on that board, right? He was in cabinet, and now he's back in the backbench. So I don't know if he gets that input up front, but he certainly has made his opinions known now. Is this damaging for them at all?
As a scribbler and a babbler who has complained about backbench MPs being reduced to the role of trained seals balancing a ball on their nose and barking their approval whenever required as a backdrop, we've got to find it refreshing. We do, because
when people speak honestly, it's always better.
That's right. And so if you have good relationships with backbench MPs on both sides of the aisle, this is the kind of thing that you hear.
Did you hear David Cochrane there? What? When people speak honestly, it's always better. Okay, so when a Liberal comes out, makes a YouTube video publicly criticizing the Cabinet's budget, which is the most important piece of legislation that they're going to put out that year, that's a good thing because they're coming out and speaking honestly. That's amazing. Go team. But when a Conservative does it, oh, that's a problem with Pierre Poilievre's leadership. They should think about a new leader. That's a problem. Why? I can't anymore, Cochrane. I just can't. Is this a crazy left-wing YouTube channel that I'm watching here, or is this CBC, or is it probably both?
And in the end, he says he's going to support the budget, in fact. Right? He's not going to vote against it. But you're getting a look at what really some backbench MPs, a lot of them, might be thinking. And actually, I thought it was fairly solid analysis, and I say that as someone who risks getting bounced out of this studio and replaced by Nate Erskine-Smith in the power panel.
Yeah, well...
The nervous laughter from David Cochrane. And that was a subtle jab at CBC there, man. If you heard what the guy said, he said, well, it was actually pretty solid analysis from Nate Erskine-Smith, meaning it's valid criticism of that budget. And then he goes on to say, and I say this, knowing that I could be bounced out of here because I'm on CBC. I'm not towing the Liberal line. I caught that. Seems like David Cochrane caught that because he's kind of a nervous laugher. Oh, yeah, it's not like we do that. Oh, yeah, we just did that with Travis Donraj. Oops, we're in a lawsuit over that. And he went on to start the new CBC, Can't Be Censored, which you should check out, by the way. Yeah, literally insulting CBC to his face. Oh my goodness.
I mean, Vandana, it also, I think, in some ways, shows the transition in policy and focus the party is going through right now, does it not? Like, the things Nate Erskine-Smith was talking about there, obviously they're very core to the type of liberal he is, right? The generational fairness, climate action, and aggressiveness on housing. Not saying those don't apply to Prime Minister Carney, but they're not the way they were under, say, Justin Trudeau, as at least as a leading item.
Oh, okay. Now we understand what a game of Twister we're playing now. Okay, so David has to, completely rebut that comment of, oh, this is actually good analysis of this. So David Cochrane has to tell everybody, oh, no, nobody needs to listen to that. That's something you should not pay attention to. This is just a transition in ideologies. This is fine. We're moving from Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney. And that's all this is. And everyone should just accept it, drink the red Kool-Aid, and follow this budget down into oblivion. That's what needs to happen because CBC wants to get our extra $150 million and we want to be part of Eurovision. That's what just happened there. As a host on a panel, your job is to just present points and counterpoints. You don't toe the narrative and you don't toe the line. I would have thought he had a lesson from that from Melissa Lantsman when she called him out on defending the budget better than the Liberals.
There's also currency changes. There's climate change that has led to drought.
You're a better defender of the government's budget than they are.